This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. You know, I actually could go for a ham and cheese toast and a pumpkin latte. Doctor Who is back! Christmas special time! Joy to the world! I do like when Doctor Who comes back. It just feels good. Feels good for me just to sit down and watch new Doctor Who. That having been said, I am on record as not being the biggest fan in the world of the Christmas specials. It's a tone thing. It tends to lean into a bit more camp and a bit more sort of the Christmas pantomime tradition of the UK, which just is not really my jam. I've come to terms with the fact that I don't think I will ever truly, deeply, fully love a Christmas special. There are definitely some that I do enjoy, but just as a general Doctor Who product, never really going to be my favorite thing. So go in accepting that and understand I'm kind of grading this on a curve, knowing that I'm going to come in and it's going to be a little bit more cheesy, a little bit more sentimental than is normally what I like. But I accept it, and I'm not going to complain about it across the episode because that's what the Christmas specials are. Whether that's my preference or not, that is what they are by and large. So this is fun. And that is a definite good thing for a Christmas special to be, because if it's going to be light and family entertainment and feel a little bit camp, at the very least it should be fun. And this is. This one written by Stephen Moffat, coming back to take care of the Christmas special so RTD can work on other stuff. And he does pretty solid work here. Not his best, not even his best Christmas special, but most of what's going on here I do enjoy, or at least came to enjoy as it played out, even if I had some hiccups along the way. I say most, we'll get to that. But it starts out very fun with the Doctor just popping up in different places with the pumpkin latte and the sandwich. And we then get a little bit more context after the cold open and after we've met Joy, I'll come back to her, where he's in this hotel that is the time hotel with these doors that just go to different time periods. And while, like, I know in reality that 9 times out of 10, that random locked door in the hotel room is just the door to the adjoining room, it is still a fun idea to play with, because it is one of those things that I think most of us have wondered at some point, probably when we were younger, what is that door? Why is that there? And that's a fun notion to spin off into some wild sci-fi nonsense. And this is some wild sci-fi nonsense. I also love how the Doctor ends up there. That is a gloriously silly idea. And that's, I know I kind of railed against Doctor Who being a little too cheesy or a little too silly. I actually kind of do differentiate the two. Silly is not the same as cheesy, and I do like some silly Doctor Who-ness. And the idea that the TARDIS just zeroed in on this thing so he could get hot water and milk. Like, that's lovely. That's ridiculous and lovely. And also kicks off a pretty good run of having small moments be indicative of this Doctor's particular mindset right now and sort of where he's at without too much having to have him stop the story dead in order to explain it, because it gets pointed out by Trev. Oh, Trev. Come back to him too. Gets pointed out by Trev, like, you've got 2 mugs. Somebody else in there? And the Doctor's like, oh, right. Habit. So he's still kind of processing and still kind of dealing with the fact that he's traveling alone. And that is a good thing. But then the thing I liked even more than that is he goes back in the TARDIS, sets those mugs down, grabs his coat, grabs his Sonic, isn't even sure why he's doing it yet. I really like this idea that he's running on instinct. He definitely saw something was definitely off, and he definitely has to deal with it, but his conscious brain hasn't quite registered what it is yet. He's been doing this long enough. He can spot shady stuff. He can spot something's off, and he knows that this needs to be dealt with, but it hasn't fully processed to the front of his mind yet. So he's like, why am I doing that? And then he gets this grin and is like, well, let's find out why I'm doing that. Off we go, adventure. Additionally, I also want to highlight how well this episode highlights Gatwa as the Doctor and really gives us his personality. A funny thing I found myself thinking is that there's a fair amount of the lines that I could have seen other Doctors delivering, like especially Capaldi. There are a number of his interactions with both Joy and Anita that I could definitely hear Capaldi doing, but the thing is, Gatwa did them differently from how Capaldi did it. If you've ever seen any clip of a Doctor actor at a convention where they do another Doctor's speech as they would have done it.
Listen, you lot are all whizzing about. It's really very distracting. Could you all just stay still a minute? Because I am talking.
The question of the hour is, who's got the Pandorica? Answer. I do! The question, who's coming to take it from me?
Come on, look at me. No plan, no backup, no weapons worth a damn. Oh, and something else I don't have. Anything to lose.
So if you're sitting up there in your silly spaceships with all your silly little guns, and you've got any plans on taking the Pandorica tonight, just remember who's standing in your way. Remember.
Every black day I ever stopped you, and then
do the smart thing.
Let someone else try first.
Let somebody else try first.
Let somebody else try first.
Let somebody else try first.
It's really fascinating, and you really get to the core of the difference between the personalities, even when they're saying the same words. I kind of had that moment in an odd way with this episode, and I liked it. Okay, I said I'd come back to Joy and Trav. I'm actually going to start with Trav. Trav, I had an interesting journey with as a character. Spoilers, by the way, if you didn't guess. This isn't going to be a full 100% recap of the episode in linear order. I am going to be jumping around and talking about the various points at just across the thing. Like, I'm going to talk about Trav's whole arc right now. So that's going to include some stuff towards the back end. Just be aware of that. So Trav gets introduced, and he's just sweet. Like, this performer has such wonderful, sweet energy to him. Like, he's trying his best, and he just wants to do a good job. And you can tell, like, it's hard for him. The Doctor's saying, like, you know, move like you don't know something's wrong. Well, I don't know what's wrong. Well, why can't you be more nonchalant? Well, I haven't practiced this. Like, it's great, and it's fun, and he gets excited that he gets given a mission, and then he gets killed. And initially, I didn't love that. Now, I do feel like it is worth noting here and differentiating, because during Chibnall's era, I went off a lot about what I labeled as casual cruelty, where there were characters whose main purpose was ultimately just to die, who Chibnall would characterize in incredibly superficial ways, intended to just twist a knife when there is literally no reason to do that, if it's even necessary for the character to die at all, which more often than not it wasn't. My go-to examples tend to be the guard in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, who is briefly established to be a grandfather with a family that loves him and will therefore miss him, and then he dies. There's literally no reason for that character to die at all. It doesn't even establish the alien threat. The alien's already been killing people. That's what I mean by casual cruelty. The narrative just is gonna go, oh, look at this sweet grandfather. Now he's dead. Another go-to example would be from the New Year's special Resolution, and the guard who is briefly established to have a boyfriend. So we get Bury Your Gaze on top of, oh, let's establish someone will miss him and then kill him. Now, I think most people get what I'm on about with that, but I have gotten a tiny bit of pushback, like, but why are you acting like it's a bad thing to try and give some depth to these fodder characters? Well, because that's not depth. You're not actually making me care about them. You are painting a superficial just idea of a person on them to make a moment that honestly barely matters to the story hurt. If you're gonna hurt me as a viewer, I'd like there to be a reason, and I'd like you to earn it. And while I didn't love Trav dying, it did earn that hurt. I wasn't angry. I felt the loss because he was a character I enjoyed because unlike Chibnall, Moffat, even though he was going to kill this guy, took the time to establish who he is as a person, give me a sense that, oh, I like you as a person, not just like this one single character trait. No, I get a sense of you. I get a sense of what it would be like to be around you and just spend time. And I like you. And therefore, when he dies, especially that little moment where he feels like, oh no, I did let him down. It felt like that was a death that the narrative acknowledged mattered. Now, you could argue that, well, okay, but you had earlier fodder deaths with the guy who first shows up with the briefcase and then the bartender's like, yes. And they were treated as fodder. They were not given superficial personality traits to try and make it seem like you made a character when it was just fodder. It's okay to have fodder characters. Just don't try and paint them as something other than what they are. I, for one, don't appreciate it. So when Trav died, I wasn't thrilled. But then they bring him back. Then they bring him back in a way that just, I cheered. I cheered when that little holographic image of Trav comes up. He starts talking to the doctor. And I knew immediately, just in my heart, not even in my head, in my heart, like, he's going to help. Like, I couldn't rationalize why he'd be able to do that. And then, there's some hand-wavy dialogue as to why he's able to. But, like, I just knew in my heart, Trav's here and he's going to help. And it made me so happy. It was really nice. And also, speaking of deaths that get well acknowledged, the death of the Silurian manager. That's another one where I feel like the show goes for a certain amount of pathos. In this case, it's more about the doctor recognizing and feeling the pain of the death than I think the audience necessarily. And I do think that is a distinction worth making because when Trav dies, the doctor doesn't know. And I think that was one of the things that initially lingeringly bothered me. Like, the doctor's not going to get to acknowledge this loss because he doesn't know what happened. But the loss of Trav, affected me as an audience member. Whereas the loss of the Silurian manager, who we do not know nearly as well, affects the doctor. And that has some impact on me by proxy, but the way that he's able to relate to this Silurian and the Silurian talking about how I just ended up there and they were the nicest people and they took care of me, that felt like a small moment that earned a certain amount of, I was going to say humanity, Silurianity to the character. And that was a small moment that I appreciate. Because again, I don't have a problem with characters dying. I don't even have a problem with characters dying when they are just fodder and are just there to move the story along. What I have a problem with is when you linger on a character dying and there isn't anything that comes of that. There's no moments that feel like they were worth you doing that. And in the case of both the manager and Trav, yeah, I felt that, and those felt good, especially, again, in contrast to what we were having a couple years ago under Chibnall. So those were moments I liked, and Trav was a character that I especially enjoyed. Joy. I like the performer a lot. She is adorable. She has wonderful energy to her. I really wanted to like her. And the issues are not with the performance. The writing felt off. There was something about the heavy emphasis on she's single on Christmas. She's alone in a hotel room. She has a couple lines about, men all the same, which gives you this idea that if she has a love life, it's a not particularly good one, definitely not active at the moment. And just this layering on of all this stuff like, isn't it kind of sad what her life is? And she's in a hotel talking to a fly and she's being chipper about it. I feel a lot of sort of the hand of the writer in the character of Joy. The decisions made about what aspects of her get emphasized and then continually re-emphasized throughout the dialogue that she has with other characters or that she has with herself just felt clunky. And here's a funny thing. I've seen people criticizing the way that Moffat writes women for years. And I'm not not going to say I didn't see it, but for the most part, a lot of the things that people point to when they talk about the issues with how Moffat tends to write women, while I will acknowledge those issues are there, oftentimes they are leaning into character types and tropes that I still kind of like. Like, does he overuse certain things? The certain too clever for their own good, sort of sexy in brain and body way, between Clara and Missy, and over on Sherlock with that take on Irene Adler. Does he overuse that? Yes. Is it a bit tropey? Yes. But it's also a trope I kind of enjoy. This was, one of the first times, there might have been another somewhere along the line, but this is one of the first times where I feel like I'm seeing legitimate issues with Moffat not really doing a very good job at fully rounding a female character, and instead just kind of loading her up with attributes. And what personality is there is kind of completely brought in by the actress, who is doing a decent job. Again, the performance is not the issue, but the writing it's kind of superficial and it's kind of shallow. And it's odd that I found myself thinking that, because by contrast with, say, Anita, she's not given all that much more in terms of core personality traits than Joy is, really. But I think there's something about seeing her over time and seeing a dynamic build between her and the Doctor that felt like getting to know her with a lot less of sort of just layering on, oh, here's all this stuff. You understand her now, right? No, I felt like I got to actually spend time with her. And actually, I do want to pause on this for a minute. That whole section with the Doctor just living a year in that hotel, I really like, and I think it might actually be the strongest thing in the episode. I have a strong suspicion that some people are complaining about it, saying it's too long, drawn out, or it kills the pacing or whatever. I don't think it does, especially not in a Christmas episode. Not in a Christmas episode where part of the point is highlighting human connection and the happiness we bring each other, which is the point of most Christmas specials to some degree. I think that entire section is really lovely. It's also fun to watch the contrast of this Doctor living an ordinary life and seeing beauty in it with, say, the 11th Doctor, who went bonkers after about an hour trying to live a normal life and move through time at a standard pace. So that in and of itself is fun. But also, there's something about the way Ncuti Gatwa interacts with himself, with his future and past self, when he gets the code. I also love the little dialogue about how, Bootstrap, this place is basically paradox proof. If I'd used the TARDIS, it would have been a big problem. But the way this place works is fine. Again, hand-wavy technobabble, deployed correctly, which Moffat's pretty good at. But the way that he talks to himself, the way that the younger version gets so mad, snaps in the moment saying, you have this empty TARDIS that you don't even have chairs in, and you haven't even realized that because you never have anybody over to just be. And the future Doctor, knowing what that realization is going to bring him to, and just being like, you'll find out. There's subtle differences in the performance on each half of that, and Gatwa does it really, really well. And I love that once he's actually alone in the room, it fully hits the Doctor like, I don't have any chairs. Actually, the sort of coming back to, and the re-emphasis on chairs, and this sort of as a welcoming thing, like a place for people to sit so we can just be together. I actually rather like that as a recurrent motif as well. So the connection between Anita and the Doctor feels a lot more earned, even though, again, I'm not sure Anita, if I were to actually break down the characters, has much more development than Joy. It's just feeling like we got to know her over a stretch of time, both us and the Doctor, whereas Joy just showed up, oh, I'm single and I'm lonely, but I'm gonna put on a smile anyway, and like sort of almost character trait dumping at the front end. I don't know, it felt clumsier, it felt more contrived. There's another thing with Joy, but we'll circle back to that later on, my bigger issue with Joy, because I just want to note that something felt off about Joy almost from the start to me, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it until later on. And then I was like, oh, right. We'll get there. So in the meantime, Valengard, This is becoming a recurrent thing. Another thing that I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening. I don't know if it is. I don't check other people's reactions before recording my own thoughts. But I would not be surprised if the theory hounds are starting to like come up with all these ideas of Valengard being like a future, major plot point. Oh, that's going to be a bigger thing. Like, I don't think it ever is. I mean, part of it is that it only comes up in Moffat stories. It first got name dropped way back in series 1. I believe it was the Dr. Dances specifically. It got name dropped because used to be a weapons factory. Now it's Banana Grove. Bananas are good. So there's that, and there's Boom, and they run the ambulances and are supplying all the weapons. And now here again, I don't think it's building to a larger story. I think that Moffat has just decided this is his go-to. All right. This story doesn't need an individual villain. It just needs a villainous intent. And a weapons manufacturer corporation is pretty good for that. Because this story, like Boom for that matter, doesn't benefit from a specific individual who is the bad guy. But it does kind of need an overhanging antagonistic force that has caused the problem. And I think Valengard is just going to be Moffat's bucket to pull from for that when he needs it. And I think that's a really good use for it. If they actually try and build larger stories around Valengard, I'll actually be kind of disappointed because it would undermine the nature of why it's working right now. Because like it is a corporation, it doesn't have a singular face. You can't punch one person and fix the problem. It's like okay. Odd comparison. If they were to narrow down Valengard and like give it a head of corporate development or whatever and like make that a recurring villain, I'd be real disappointed in the same way that I was ultimately disappointed in the Borg Queen over with Star Trek. Now, like when I first saw the Borg Queen, I wasn't disappointed. I was a teenager, but over time, as my own sense of writing and everything else solidified, I realized like, oh, that's actually a real big downgrade of the concept of the Borg, because part of what made the Borg scary was they are a collective. They are a hive mind. It doesn't matter how many individual ones you defeat. There is always more, and it is always a greater threat. There is no single head for you to cut off. Then they introduced the Borg Queen, and like, here's a single head for you to cut off. Like, oh, it's just less interesting. So, I spent longer on Valengard than I think I should have. But I like the way that Moffat is currently making use of them, and that is how I hope that corporation continues to be used in the future, whether Moffat's the only one who does it or if other writers get to do it as well. I don't want a deeper look or the idea of the Doctor has to finally take down Valengard. No, I want them as like, it's just this corporate nonsense that keeps showing up like, oh, right, this crap again. It's good for that when you don't need an in-person villain. So the Star Seed, that's kind of a fun concept. This idea of like, well, we want to harness the power of a star. We need one. They take a long time to make though. Cool, send it back in time. It's simple, it's straightforward, and honestly feels like a pretty corporate mentality. The thing with the T-Rex and eating it, like that's the kind of thing I chalk up to Christmas time silliness and largely just kind of let it go. Something I did appreciate towards the end is when we get like this final what happens with the star and with everyone whose consciousness has contributed to it. It's kind. And that's nice. Because again, not only is this a story that doesn't need a singular villain, it's a very common thing in sci-fi in general that when something is powerful enough, it has a superiority complex. It thinks it's better than everything else. It thinks it should control everything else. It thinks it has the right to destroy everything else. And no, this star is kind. I like that. And that feels very Christmas, although going to the degree of having it be the star over Bethlehem, which first of all, I called the instant that star formed. I'm like, I freaking know where that's going. Fine, whatever. It wasn't Christmassy enough for you with the big golden tree in the middle of the Time Hotel that so much of the rest of this was set at that wasn't enough? That's not fine. But of course, the creation of that star involved the sacrifice of Joy. And now we're getting to it. I really didn't like this. I didn't like this at all. And it kind of solidified all my other problems with Joy. Again, from a writing perspective only. The performer, I think, did the best that she could with what she was given. And I think given better material, she would have been phenomenal. But let's talk a little bit about characters who sacrifice themselves. That is a hard needle to thread, especially when they are a single appearing character. Now, understand, a character sacrifice is different from just any character death. It is specifically a character going forward and taking on an action that they are aware will result in their death and doing it voluntarily. Self-sacrifice as a general narrative thing is already can go some bad places. I have an entire video where I talk specifically about the notion of redemption through death. So that's usually when a villain self-sacrifices for the greater good at the very end and is treated as if the character as a whole is redeemed. And I really dislike that. As I said, I did a whole video on that. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply specifically to Joy. So what's the problem with Joy? Well, given that the emphasis on her character is that she is single, lonely, feels guilt from the loss of her mother, and when the doctor goes after her for being lonely and kind of pathetic, it rings true enough for her sense of self, that it, successfully helps her break out of the grasp of the starseed for a little bit. But that is all the emphasis we get. So my question to you is, what is actually lost? Yes, a person's life. But what specifically is she giving up? Nothing. She is unhappy. She is lonely. She has this forced frivolity that she can barely keep up. Her life kind of sucks. And I think having a character whose life has been painted in a sad sack way, having that be the sacrificial character, lends a often unintentional, I will grant, but lends a certain air of, well, this is probably better than any other outcome for them anyway. It's a cheapening of who they are, or more importantly, a cheapening of who they could be. By way of comparison, let's take a look at Astrid from Voyage of the Damned. Now, I don't super like Voyage of the Damned for a number of reasons, but Astrid's sacrifice at the end, that works a lot better than this because we know what she's giving up. She was going to have more adventures. She very specifically had the potential of traveling with the doctor. She had a whole life full of, excitement, adventure, happiness to look forward to, and she chose to give that up in order to save the doctor. That is a sacrifice that means something. Joy gives up what? We have no indication of any connections that she has with anybody. We have no indication of any actual plans or hope that she has for the future. She's not actively depressed. Well, actually, no, she probably is. They've just painted over it with this, and they acknowledge very mask-like glee that she kind of presents herself with. What is actually lost by her sacrifice? Now, all life, in reality, all life has value, all life has future potential. No matter how dark a place you are in at any given time, you still have potential in the future. Things can get better even if you don't currently have those kinds of connections, even if you don't think that you can see a way that has hope. There is still future potential for you. There is always time. But we're not dealing with a real person. We're dealing with a character and a narrative. A character who has only been presented as having nothing going on that is an actual sacrifice she's going to give up. She's not giving up future time with anybody or future time spent doing anything. We get no indication of her actual inner life, of what she would like to do with her time if she still lived. We know what Astrid would have done. I don't know what Joy would have done. And that makes the sacrifice less sacrificial. Because again, we're not talking about an actual human being. We're talking about a character. And it's a character who had nothing going on. And I'm not saying that that means you can't have affection for her or you can't have that moment work for you. I'm saying why that moment doesn't work for me. And it made everything else click into place because now it feels like the front loading of her personality traits, the heavy emphasis on being alone, being single, the loss of her mother, the sadness in her life feels like an attempt to take a sacrifice at the end and make it as happy as possible. I think another part of the reason that this feels off is this wasn't a situation where it struck me that somebody has to die for characters to get out of this was even on the table. Like, it didn't even occur to me that that was like something liable to happen. I thought the loss was going to be more like, well, you know, Trav and whoever else's personality is in that thing, they'll be gone forever. But like, a person has to die to stop this? That felt like it came out of nowhere. And then I see Joy smiling. I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a whole, she's happy to die. And like, I'm not saying she can't take, you know, some kind of fulfillment out of the notion that her sacrifice, and yes, yeah, I also understand, no, she doesn't consider herself truly dead, like she's part of the star and she's out. Don't argue semantics with me on that. Functionally, the character is dead. The existence that she had is over. That life is gone. And there is no sacrifice to that. And I don't like that. I will say that, like, the moments with her, of the flashbacks with her mother, those did get me. Now, I think that has just more to do with, you know, my own history of people that I care about who have been in dire straits or who I have lost over time, that just hit certain notes for me. But I'll cop to that working. But the overall notion of just sacrificing Joy in this way felt cheap. And it made me feel like I look back at everything that felt slightly off about her as like, oh, she was designed to be sacrificed. This is a problem that I also had with a fair amount of Chibnall's writing. She feels reverse engineered. She feels like, all right, we're starting from a position of we know this is what's going to happen to her. What kind of character do we build where that is not depressing? Reverse engineering in writing, I'm not going to say it's an altogether bad thing, but when you get a sense that that's what happened, it becomes a problem because it means the character feels more like a function of the narrative than a person. Again, I think that's a way that she contrasts with Anita. Anita feels like a person in a world. Joy feels like a function of the story. And it's frustrating because a lot of what else is in here I do like. I like a lot of the other characters. And as I said, I love the stuff with Anita. And like, here's a note that's going to be really weird. I already said that the segment with Anita is the best thing in the episode. But here's the thing. If you were always going to sacrifice Joy, you probably should have cut that. I said I disagree that like it kills the pacing. I don't think it does. The actual flow and pacing of the episode I think is good as is. But if you are always going to kill Joy and you want to have that actually mean something, we needed more time with Joy as Joy. Because the time that we could have spent getting to know her better, fleshing her out as a character, actually giving her an internal life so that she's actually giving something, anything up at the end with the sacrifice, the thing to cut in order to have more time to do that would be the stuff with Anita. I mean, that's a natural cut to make. And I know, again, it's a strange note to say, this is the best thing in the story. It should probably be cut. I don't actually think it should be cut, but if that's what you're going to do with Joy, we needed more from her as a character, and that is the easiest place to put it, is to replace the stuff with Anita. I am kind of suggesting that in order to fix something that didn't work, you have to throw out the best thing in the story. Either that or you need to change your ending somehow so that it's no longer necessary that we get to know Joy better. And I said get to know Joy as Joy. I don't just mean like the inner life thing. She's also possessed by the starseed for a chunk of this thing. So like the sense of her, other than just the energy brought by the actress, just isn't really there. It's a shame because a lot of the other stuff going on here, I either like or at least enjoyed. The overall plot structure, the feel, the tone actually worked better for me than a lot of the Christmas specials, but just that ending, I just didn't love it. Oh, I will kind of note, this was pointed out to me, but I am kind of glad we didn't get Mrs. Flood in like that sort of montage at the end of people seeing the star, you know, the folks during the Blitz and Ruby seeing the star and Joy's mom seeing the star. I'm glad they didn't insert Mrs. Flood in there. That would have annoyed me. So yeah, I for the problems that I have, which not everybody might have these problems. And again, my job is not to say why you shouldn't like something. My job is to explain to you why I do or don't like something. So you do not have to agree with me on any of my assessment of this. It is good. Asterisks. It's good, but is kind of how this one shapes up for me. And under other circumstances, I might think, well, maybe it'll bother me less with time. The thing is, though, it's not a smaller nitpicky thing. It's like the core of the climax. Like, that's a hard thing for me to fully overlook. But again, there is enough good in here that I'm not going to say it's bad. It took a turn at the end that, for me as a viewer, was a turn straight into a brick wall. Did it mean that everything up into that point was ruined and suddenly didn't work? No, the stuff that's good is still good. But, yeah. Oh, for the record, yes, I have seen the teaser for season 2. No, there will not be a reaction either here or in my secondary channel, Break Room of Geeks, if you had missed me talking about this. Trailer reactions have been getting claimed like mad by literally everybody. They've all become massive jerks about this lately. It's like it's 2018 again. It's real bad. And so there is a trailer reaction, but it is on my Patreon. And that trailer reaction is actually viewable to any member, even unpaid members. That having been said, while you're there, if you feel like helping support this and what I do, it is what allows me to do this as my living and have these out for you after some probably highly intensive editing sessions right after Christmas. Also, that is my preferred version of this review video. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing it with still images because BBC are jerks and have decided that I shouldn't be using any clips of any length whatsoever. But I think my videos are better with clips. I think it illustrates the point better. And I think it makes for better viewing. That version, that's over on Patreon. So there you go. But what did you think of this one? Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments and let's talk about it. Like, share, and subscribe also help me out a pretty fair amount. I'll take what I can get. December is not a great time for YouTubers in general. It's a rough month, so I'll take what I can get. But thank you very much for watching. And what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You are the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now it's time to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lutfulla, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Renabulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam RDL Taylor, Pal Barabajoggle, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. You can hear me try and say your name while dealing with these guys crawling all over me by checking out the reward tiers on my Patreon. See you next time.